Good afternoon, members. Can everybody confirm that he or she is getting me correctly? Am I audible enough? Am I audible enough? Good, good. Thank you for those who are confirming. Also, I would like to clarify that I might not get another opportunity to go through this unit, this topic rather. Therefore, you have to share this information to everyone that you know that this might be our first and our last time for us to cover this topic. For the reason being that I had given you a promise that we are supposed to clear the unit or the course before you break for Christmas holiday, and therefore I chose this mode for doing that, so that by the time you will be coming back after the Christmas, if God will be gracious to us, we are going to do the examples and as well as trying to assist those who will be having a challenge in addressing the exam questions. Therefore, as I can see, we are around 17 of us, and therefore I want to believe that we are yet to reach the quorum. But as I told you there before, that we will not be waiting for the latecomers, because here time is of essence to us. I want to believe that you being on in holiday, you also need time to get connected to your family members and also do some kind of recap of where you left before you came for your studies. And therefore, I want to take the shortest time possible to cover this topic of consumer theory, and therefore I will take at least 1 hour so that you can also get time to do your other businesses. That means since we are starting at around 1:05, and therefore we might stop at exactly 2 o'clock. Will that be okay with us, all of us? Can I get the confirmation that you are okay with that? Those members who are present, can they confirm that? Okay. Also, something that I'd like to confirm to us: you don't share your private information, because that one is a social group, that is YouTube, which is subject to outsiders. Because right now we have at least there are around the institution who will be sending their students here, and therefore I don't know who is who, and therefore don't share your private information. This include your name, the institution that you are in, or your registration number. Just say yes or no, and if you would like to give more information, or maybe to direct or to give more personal details, you have my WhatsApp number. Both the institution, you have my WhatsApp number, therefore you are free to ask. Therefore, having said that, let us go direct to our discussion. Now, what we mean by the consumer theory, remember when we were discussing something to do with the production theory, we said that economics is divided into two: the result part of the demand side of it, and also the result part of the producer part of it, or the suppliers. And therefore, when we were discussing things to do with the consumer theory, producer theory, we more of discussed the way the suppliers are going to behave, and because of that, they are going to be looking for a way in which they can maximize their profit. And therefore, having said that, we also recognize and we say that when we are discussing things to do with production theory, this is all to do with how the suppliers behave in form of micro, or other, it is a micro way of understanding the economics. Because as we said there before, the very first topic, the very first lecture we had, that economics is also divided into two categories: the result part of macroeconomics and also the result part of microeconomics. And therefore, when we will be discussing this to do with the microeconomics, we are going to discuss microeconomics either on the demand side of it or the supply side of it. And therefore, this thing that we are calling the consumer theory, it is the demand side of the microeconomics. And therefore, having said that, we can also recognize the fact that when we were discussing something to do with the producer, it was a microeconomics but on the supplier side. And therefore, it is very, very important for us to understand that, because that forms the basis of our understanding or the basis of our discussion. And if we are going to be having, we said don't share your name, Derek, don't share your name. We don't want you to be presenting your name here, for the reason being that we have the institutions, we have the institutions which are sending their students here. Therefore, I don't want also to mention their name. Therefore, just say yes or no. And if you have something that you want to clarify, or if you want to give me more information about yourself, kindly use my WhatsApp number. You have my number. Both the very institution, they have my WhatsApp number. Therefore, I want to believe you are going to know that. Therefore, don't give your name here. Neither don't give your name. Don't give the name of your institution. Neither don't give your registration number. Those are not needed here. Neither your contact. So, having said that, therefore, we are going to expand that understanding and say that the consumer theory. This is whereby we are going to be discussing how the demand behaves, or how the people who are going to be more of affected by the demand are going to behave in the market. And therefore, just like how the suppliers are supposed to be maximizing their how the suppliers are going to be maximizing their profit, therefore the consumer has also the way of which they are going to be maximizing something that belongs to them, and that is the satisfaction. Because in any case, somebody who is going to be demanding certain commodity in the market, he or she is going to be having some kind of desire, and therefore that desire is one which you'll be looking for to satisfy. And therefore that satisfaction that you'll be looking for, that is what we call the utility. Therefore, what we call the profit in the producer's theory and the consumer theory, it is going to be referred to as the utility. Therefore, we are going to get something we call the utility in the consumer theory, and also this utility is going to be derived from consuming a certain good and services in the market, which are going to be subjected to the amount of income or the amount of money that you have, and that is what we are going to be calling the income. But also remember, there is an aspect of the price which is going to be coming in. I'm just giving a preview so that once we start the discussion, you will be understanding what you're talking about. There's something that we call also the price, and the price we said this when we were discussing the demand and the supply. We said that price is something which is going to have an interplay both on the side of the demand and the side of the suppliers. Therefore, even on the side of the consumer, we are going to have an aspect of the price, just like how we had the price in the side of the producer, whereby we say that the producer or the people who are supplying goods and services in the market, they are going to be categorizing, or they are going to be supplying their goods and services in a certain market which is going to fetch the highest price so that they can have the highest profit, marking that they also have to minimize the cost of the producing those goods and services, and that is the factors of production. They have to minimize the factors of production so that at the end of the day, if you have the difference, or if you look for the difference between the revenue, which is product multiplied by the quantity produced in the market, less the cost of producing those goods and services, then you are going to have what you call the profit at the highest level possible. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, let us dig deep into our topic, consumer theory. We are going to have a small preview of the theory and also some minor calculation, but of course, this calculation we are going to do some kind of recap when we will be resuming our lectures. Therefore, when calculation, if the calculation is not going to be clear to you, kindly ask, or if you not have an opportunity to ask, then you are going to ask it when you have a physical class. That is when you resume your lectures. Meaning of the consumer theory. A consumer, as I told you there before, this is somebody who is going to be directed to go into a certain market so that he can get goods and services. In other words, you consume. A consumer is something which is going to be derived from what we call the consumption. Therefore, and you're going to consume a certain good and services because you have the demand for it. You cannot go to Juja market, for instance, to buy a certain number of bananas if you're not going to consume those bananas. You cannot go to somewhere to buy tea or to buy mandazis or to eat if you're not going to consume the food that you're going to buy. And therefore, you are going to be buying the bananas, or you're going to buy food so that you can be able to consume that food or those bananas so that you get the satisfaction. And therefore, the satisfaction that you're going to be getting, it is what is referred to as a utility. That is what is referred to as a utility. Therefore, the aim of this person that we are calling the consumer, it is just to satisfy his level of, to have the highest level of satisfaction, which in this case it is the highest level of utility. Just like how we said in the production theory that the target of a producer is to get the highest level of profit. And therefore, for you to be able to have maximum utility, which in this case is going to be abbreviated with U, we are going to be having two factors which are going to affect the maximum level of satisfaction that you're going to be getting. One of those factors is what we call the price, Of course, anything which exists in the market must have a certain price. Therefore, the price of goods and services, or the price of something that you're going to be buying in a certain market, it is going to be directing you how you're going to get your maximum satisfaction, because you, as a person who we are calling the consumer, you need to be somebody who is rational, and that is one of the assumptions that you're going to be taking, that you're going to be selecting goods and services which have at least the least prices possible in the market. And therefore, if you are going to be selecting goods which have the least price in the market, therefore you are going to be securing your income in any case. You, unless maybe you are not rational, therefore, if you are a rational person, if you go to a certain market and then you find that, for instance, you want to buy something like a phone, and just what you want is to communicate. Therefore, you cannot go and buy an expensive phone, leave a cheap phone, and all what you need is to communicate. Therefore, what you will do, you are going to buy a certain phone which is cheap, so that you can save some kind of an indirect income. Because if you had a budget of, let's say, something like 10,000 and you want to buy a phone, if what will happen is you are going to buy a phone which is having the least price possible, so that you can save as much as possible. So at the end of the day, you are going to find that your level of income will be somehow be improved, in the essence that you have not spent as much expenditures as possible. And therefore, the aspect of income and the aspect of the price have to play a big part when you want to get the highest level of satisfaction, and that is the utility. In other words, we are saying that the price, P, and income, they are actually the main factor or the determinant of how you are going to be maximizing your profit. So, this person that we are going to be calling a consumer, or person who is going to be influenced by this aspect of the consumer theory, must be following, or must follow a certain rules and regulation, or must work within a certain perimeter, and that is what we call the assumptions. Number one, there is what we call the assumption of rational consumer. Number two, there is what we call the assumption of complete and the transitive preference. Number three, there is what we call the diminishing marginal utility. And number four, there is what we call the price and the income should also be available, or they should be given. Those are the four assumptions which are very, very common and which are supposed to be existing, so that we can be able to understand how a consumer theory do operate. We begin by the least one, that is the price and income. That one we have already discussed, and have already told you that the price and the income has to come into play, so that you can be able to get the highest level of assumption. In other words, the highest level of satisfaction, or the highest level of utility. And in other words, the assumption that we are actually talking about here, it is assumptions which are going to be guiding us of how we can be able to get the maximum, or how the maximum utility is going to behave. And therefore, price and income has to come into play, so that we get the highest level of satisfaction. When we talk of the marginal utility, remember when we were talking about the productivity, we said that if you are going to have a fixed land, and therefore you continue pumping the fertilizer in that land, you are going to reach a point whereby the amount of fertilizer that you are going to be putting into that piece of land, it will not be good, but rather it will be a bad fertilizer. Even if we know that fertilizer is one of the supplements which is supposed to increase the productivity. Therefore, it is at that level when we talk of
that increasing of something is not going to be actually bringing an increase in the productivity, but rather is going to be bringing what we call a decrease in the productivity. And therefore, when we have such kind of a behavior, whereby we input something instead of increasing the output, we have a decrease in output. Therefore, we have what we call a marginal, a diminishing marginal. Therefore, it all depends with now what you are talking of marginal. Are you talking of now marginal productivity, or are you talking about the marginal utility? And therefore, when it comes to the diminishing marginal utility, what we mean is, if you go to a certain market, you want to buy maybe bananas, or you want to go and buy something like the eggs, or you want to go and buy something like oranges, etc., etc., etc. At the first point, because you are hungry, you are going to buy those eggs, or you are going to eat those foods, or you are going to eat those fruits. But then it is going to reach a point whereby, if you continue consuming those goods, or those fruits, or those food, then it will not be good food, neither will it be good fruit, but rather it will be a wastage. Because instead of now satisfying you, you are going actually to constipate. You are going to remove whatever is inside you. And therefore, that one is now what we call the marginal utility. Therefore, a marginal utility here is going to mean, as you increase the consumption, the level of satisfaction starts to go down. And therefore, we have more of a downward uh, rate of reduction. In other words, as you increase goods and services, therefore you are going to be having a reduction in the level of satisfaction. I think we have that graph with us, and that one I shared with us. There is a handout that I shared with the three groups, and therefore you already have that handout under the consumer theory. When we talk of the complete and transitive preferences, a complete, this arises when a consumer or person who is going to be driven to go into a market to buy goods and services, he or she is going to do what we call the comparison of whatever is in the market. For instance, if you go to Juja market today and you want to buy bananas, or if you go to Inyaka market and you want to buy bananas, you are going to consider all the suppliers of bananas in that market, and therefore you will be picking, or you will be buying goods and services, or you are going to buy that banana from a seller who is going to be selling the least, because that is your target. You want to know the person who is going to be selling the least price, so that you can be a customer to him or her. When you talk of the rank, now rank comes in form of now trying to compare. You compare, maybe you have two people who are selling the same product but at the rate. Therefore, the next thing that you'll be thinking of is to rank between this supplier and that one who is having a banana which looks like they are clean, which are big, and you feel that instead of, even if the two people are selling the same product, the same price, but I'm going to buy this one because these bananas are clean and they are big than of the other person. Therefore, you do what you call, we rank the product that you're going to be buying, and therefore, person who is going to be moving to a market so that he or she can buy those goods and services, he is going to do what we call a comparative, and also is going to do what we call ranking, so that you can be able to know which good am I going to buy. When we talk of the transitive arises when you have something we call the comparative in such that you are comparing at least the element. For instance, you want to buy something like uh, an orange and a banana, and maybe, for instance, an apple. You want to buy maybe an apple, for instance, then banana, and then we have what we call something like an orange, for instance. Banana. Allow me just to type DA for the sake of the space is better than orange. therefore apple so what we mean is that when we talk of the transitive, we mean that if apple is better than banana and banana is better than orange, then it automatically follows that apple should be better than orange. In other words, if you like eating apple better than eating a banana, and if you like eating a banana better than an orange, it therefore follows automatically that an apple is better than an orange, but not the other way around. That orange is better than this one cannot arise. That is how the utility or the preferences behave, and therefore that one actually is going to be becoming very clear when we shall be discussing another aspect of the consumer theory that we call the indifference curve. When you talk of a rational consumer is somebody who is going to be very, very clear when he or she is going to be moving into a certain market, and therefore that one you have already said several times that this is someone who is going to be very clear when he or she wants to buy a certain good and services. Therefore, his preferences or his decision to buy a certain good will be very, very straightforward and will be very, very clear. And therefore, he needs to compare the cost, and therefore he is going to choose the best product which is going to be existing in that market. Therefore, it must be something which is very clear to him, and also he compares the market, and therefore he chooses the best. And therefore, the four rational consumer, if maybe you are taking some notes, a rational consumer is one of the assumptions. The other one is complete and transitive preferences. The third one is what we call the diminishing marginal utility, and the fourth one is what we call the price and income must also be given for that market or for that consumer to be able to make a certain decision. Therefore, having said that, that's all what you need to understand as far as the consumer is concerned. Therefore, from that point, we can move further, and now we see some more detail on how the consumer behaves. The first one is actually the concept of the utility. Therefore, just like how we see that in the production, we have what we call the total production, and therefore, under the consumer theory, we have something we call the total utility. But now, the aspect of the production and also the profit maximization, they are going to be summed up here in terms of the utility. Therefore, we are going to find me using the word utility in comparison to productivity and also the profit, because here the word utility is going to behave like the profit on the production theory or the production. For the reason being that under the production theory, the level of production is actually directly proportional to the profit. Therefore, any person who is going to be supplying goods and services in the market, he or she must look for a way of maximizing the produce. And therefore, once he maximizes the produce, he is going to get higher profit. Therefore, there is a direct relationship between the production and the profit. But here, when it comes to the utility or the consumer theory, all what you need to maximize, it is the level of satisfaction, the utility. Therefore, utility is going to be standing for any level of satisfaction which is going to be complete, or rather the total satisfaction that a consumer gets when he or she consumes goods and services in the market. That is, if you are consuming all the bananas or all the mangoes or whichever goods that you are going to be consuming. And remember, when you are talking of good, it can be consumable good or the services. Therefore, when you consume all those goods and services in the market, whatever the satisfaction that you're going to be getting, that is basically what we mean by the utility. The marginal utility, that one I have already told you, that is an increment of the satisfaction due to an additional consumption of a certain good and services. For instance, if you take two bananas, for instance, the level of satisfaction that you're going to be getting, and then you add another one banana, then there is some kind of changes the satisfaction that you're going to be getting, and therefore that change in the marginal utility is what is going to be referred to as a marginal change in the level of satisfaction. Therefore, MU in this case, it is that change in the level of satisfaction which is going to be associated with changes in the marginal utility out of an increment of an additional satisfaction due to consuming a 1 unit of good or service. Oh, and we know basically that increment of level of satisfaction due to changes in due to an additional unit of goods and services, it is actually the same as the slope, because under the normal circumstance we always say that y is equals to m x plus C. This is something that I have already told you more than one time. This aspect that you are calling m here, it is in fact change in y due to a unit change in x. Therefore, it is actually when x changes by 1 unit, what do we expect, or what will be the change in y? Oh, sorry for this. This is new. What will be the change in y? And therefore, that is basically what we mean by m. This is m. And therefore, when you now talk of the calculus, this is actually the same as the first derivative. This is actually the same as the first derivative of that function. In other words, if this equation here that we have here, y is equals to mx plus c, if it is a sorry for that, if it is a quadratic fraction, you can get the value of m by looking for the first derivative of that fraction. And in fact, once you look for the first derivative, then you get the value of or you get the coordinate of x at a certain instant point. Then you are going to get the value of m. But if it is just linear function, just it is y is equals to mx plus c, you can basically look for the first derivative of this function and then you get the value of m. In other words, let's take for example, if you're talking of y is equals to 2x plus, for instance, 3. We know that m is equals to 2 and we know 3 is equals to the y-intercept. Therefore, if you look for change in y over change in x for this linear function, you are going to get that it is equals to 3 is equals to 2, which is actually the value of m. Therefore, it's like you have calculated the first derivative of this function. It's like you have calculated the first derivative of this function. Therefore, the first derivative of this function is actually the same as the slope of that function when it comes to a linear function. But then when it comes to a quadratic function, therefore, the first derivative of a quadratic function, that is going to give me an illustration which is now going to give me the slope at a certain point. And therefore, having said that, that m, or that component that we call m, how we calculated the component of m, it was actually change in y over change in x. And therefore, that is not going to be different when it comes to total utility and marginal utility and quantity produced, or the level of satisfaction. Therefore, when we have a total utility function, sorry for that, we are going to say that the total utility will be equals to marginal utility plus a certain component of, if at all we are going to be going in a linear way, although this is not a right way of presenting it. So that I'm doing this so that you can actually understand where does the word marginal utility comes from. Therefore, if you are going to be thinking in a linear way, that is when we can be able to represent that understanding. However, this aspect that you are calling actually T here, it should not exist when it comes to the total utility, because you cannot have a satisfaction not unless you consume something. Therefore, we don't have what we call the autonomous total utility. And therefore, under the normal circumstance, that C should always be 0. Therefore, for me to be able now to get the marginal utility in this case, therefore, I might tend to think that the total utility is equal to a marginal utility. But remember what we define, or how we define the aspect of marginal utility. Marginal utility, this is a change due to a change in level of satisfaction. Therefore, it is therefore utility which should be a function of a certain level of consuming certain goods and services in the market. And therefore, for me not to be able to get that increment of the level of satisfaction which is going to be associated with a certain level of a unit increment of a certain good and service which I have already consumed. Therefore, the only way you can do that, it is looking for the derivative of a total utility function. Because we know that the total utility in a certain market, it is going to be associated with the price of goods in that market multiplied by the quantity that you are going to be consuming. In other words, how much money have you used to buy bananas, and how many bananas have you bought in that market? Therefore, when you look at the derivative, of the total utility function, what you are actually going to be getting, it is what we call the marginal utility. Because at the end of the day, marginal utility will come as a result of a certain level of Q that you have already consumed, which in this case P will always be given, because we said there before, one of the assumptions is that it is always going to be given. Therefore, this can be any constant. It can be something like 5. Therefore, in this case, it can be 5, like, or the price of the banana, which you know it is maybe 10, something of that nature. Therefore, your total utility now will be 10 is equals to total utility is equals to 10Q, which now 10 stands for the price and Q stands for the number of bananas that you're going to buy. And therefore, for you now to be able to get what is your marginal utility, now you come and look for the first derivative of this function, which in this case it will be changes. You can remove this one on this side. Which now look in that kind of, this one should be PQ, which now looks in that kind of setup. But now since that is not what you're looking for, now once you now look for the derivative, you start looking for the derivative, it will be marginal utility marginal utility is equal to the first derivative, which is total utility over Q, or the changes in Q, or rather the first order condition of the total utility function, which in this case it will be is equal to 10. Is that okay? Is that okay for everybody? How we calculate the marginal utility? So if somebody is not going to be getting this, kindly pose a question, because we don't know whether we are going to get a privilege of covering this one again. Now, there is also another aspect that we actually refer to as the average. Somebody is asking about the average utility. Now, what we have done here, it is looking for the first order condition. It is differentiating, what we call the calculus, differentiating. Therefore, you differentiate the total utility function with respect to, in other words, let me change this and say this. Let me change this one and say this. Marginal utility is equals to first order condition of total utility with respect to Q consumed. Q consumed. That is how we look for the marginal utility. But when it comes to average utility, it will be total utility divided by Q. We don't have changes. Therefore, we must be able to make that distinction, because a changes is going to arise when we are now talking of marginal, because marginal is going to be defining the changes in the total utility due to a unit change in 1 unit of consumption. I think I have already answered that question. Somebody who is asking about the average. Now, of which that is a good recipe for the examiner. Therefore, you also have to be able to make that distinction. And therefore, when it comes now to the law of marginal diminishing marginal utility, of course, this one you have already said that as you start consuming a certain good and services in the market, your level of satisfaction start increasing, but then it's going to reach somewhere, it is now going down. And therefore, once it is now going down, it's going to reach somewhere, you are going to reach something called a diminishing marginal utility. Or is in fact, at the point when it starts now falling, such that if you increase one good, then you are going to be not having an increase in satisfaction, but rather a decrease in the satisfaction. Then that is what it is now start to give what we call diminishing marginal utility. Just like how we see under the production theory, that once you start pumping fertilizer, or once you start plowing your land with fertilizer, the level of production will start to increase, and then it will reach a point whereby an increment in fertilizer, it will not be good to that land, but rather it will be bad in that land. In other words, you will already have saturated, or rather you can think of it this way. If you are drinking tea, then you start adding sugar in it. At the first point, you will be having a very sweet tea. But as you continue adding the level of sugar in that tea, it will reach a point whereby now you not feel good drinking that tea, because it's already saturated. Therefore, at that point, therefore, the level of satisfaction now starts to fall, and that is what we call now the diminishing. And therefore, the way we do approach the highest level of satisfaction the way we do approach the highest level of satisfaction, it can be in two ways. Number one, there is what we call the cardinal approach, or there is what we call the ordinal approach. There is what we call the cardinal approach, or there's something we call the ordinal approach. Now, when you talk of the cardinal approach, this is where we look for a ratio of the marginal utility with the price associated with that goods and services that you are actually consuming. For instance, if you are comparing the consuming of two goods, in most cases, just like how we did in the production, we need to compare the capital and the labor. In this case, also under the consumer theory, we are going to be comparing the consumption of two goods, maybe banana and orange. Therefore, if you divide the marginal utility of banana with the price of banana, which is equals to the marginal utility of orange over the price of orange, at that point, therefore, you are going to say that you have already reached at the best level of satisfaction possible. You cannot be able to go beyond that point. Now, why do we say that? Because we are going to say this, that when we want to get the highest level of satisfaction, we always say that you will form a gradient. You are going to form a gradient. L is equals to total utility plus lambda, allow me to call it that way, into bracket the budget. Therefore, the problem that you'll be solving here, you'll be looking for a scenario whereby you want to look how you can maximize the total utility subject to the budget that you have. And the budget here will be a function of price and income. And the price of an income. And the total utility here, of course, we know it will be a function of Q, the quantity that you are going to be consuming. And therefore, you are going to be looking for the first order condition. Of this problem, whereby the problem will be to maximize the total utility subject to a certain level of budget that you have, the level of income that you have, and the prices of goods and services that you have. We are going to look at these examples maybe when you start when you are going to be resuming the lectures. But what I want us to understand here is, when we are dealing with the cardinal approach, it is more of a mathematical approach whereby we try to look for the highest level of satisfaction mathematically. That is what I want you to understand for now, because there's a way we actually do come and generate this thing we call the problem of the gradient problem for the cardinal approach of utility maximization. Therefore, we are going to be having a scenario whereby in this budget we have two products in the market, that is either X and Y, and therefore you look at the ratio. There is a way we are going to illustrate that, and if the class rep is going to arrange for this one, we can also arrange for a certain level of a certain lecture for looking at these examples mathematically. But for now, I just want you to have a grasp, because I don't want to keep you I don't want to spend much of your time today. Therefore, just understand that the cardinal approach, this is a mathematical approach of looking for the utility maximization. But now, when you talk of the ordinal approach, this is where we have something that we call the ranks. We actually do what we call the preferences. You just try to equate your ideologies, because what is good for you, it might not be good for somebody else. There is something that we talk of ranking when it comes to something we call coefficient for the correlation. Those people who have covered what we call the coefficient for the correlation. How we approach the ranks is going to be the way also here is going to be looked at. Now, there is something that we call the indifference curve. And the indifference curve, it is that curve which is now going to be telling us if you have a certain fixed budget and you want to consume just two goods, that is banana and also the orange. You are going to do what we call a comparative at different levels. On y-axis you are going to have bananas, and maybe at the x-axis you are going to be having what we call the oranges. And therefore, at different points, you are going to be having a different combination of bananas and oranges all the way along that curve. Now, that curve, the way you are going to be combining your combination of banana and orange, it is not the same. I can also combine my combination. For instance, you can decide that because I have 50 Kenyan shillings, you are going to take certain number of bananas and certain number of oranges. And for me, I cannot take the same number with yours. I can decide to take a different number or the same. Therefore, the way we are going to be comparing, or the way we are going to be assigning our level of income based on the combination of bananas and oranges, is going to be different based on different people. Therefore, under the ordinal approach, we are going to be saying that ordinal approach, or the way we are going to be looking for the highest level of satisfaction based on the ordinal approach, this is all to do with the argument and the preferences. And this one is going to be coming when you consider something called the indifference curve. And indifference curve, this is a curve which is going to be giving us a different combination of goods and services that it gives the same utility based on a certain level of income or based on a certain budget. Also, I would like to confirm to us that also don't strain much about the ordinal approach or the cardinal approach, for the reason being that these two approaches are going to be also to be covered when we resume in our lectures. Therefore, you don't have to worry. What I want you to have is to have just a small understanding about the consumer theory, so that once you start going through the handout that I gave you, at least you can understand what it's all about. Now, this thing that you're calling an indifference curve, therefore, it is curve, literally it's a curve which is also a downward sloping. That means it has a negative slope, although it is not a linear, it is a curve. And therefore, this curve, it is always convex to the origin and do not intersect against one another. And therefore, we can have different curves. I don't know, the time is almost, but then I want to give us this intuition that an indifference curve, these are curves which, number one, they do not intersect with one another. In other words, they do not cross one another. Number two, they are always convex to the origin. In other words, they are not concave in nature. I want to look for an example of that in nature. And if I'm not audible, kindly let me know, because can all of us get us? Do we have somebody who is not getting us? Can you confirm that I'm audible enough? Because within the next 5 or 10 minutes, I'll be done. Or am I talking to myself? Can every one of us? Are you getting? Are you getting what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is this. Let me show you. This is basically what I'm telling you. And a difference curve, these are curves which try to tell us at which different combination that we can be able to combine code x and y so that we can be able to have the best level of satisfaction. Therefore, in this case, we have indifference curve 1, we have indifference curve 2, and we have indifference curve 3. And therefore, different people are going to assign their level of satisfaction differently. Therefore, as the level of income increases, then you find that you have a difference curve 1, 2, and 3. Therefore, you are going to have a difference curve for the same, and they are actually downward sloping. And therefore, that is basically what I'm telling you. So that by the time you start going to be covering your notes, therefore you understand what they are. Therefore, a difference curve is just a map. It's more of something like curves, lines which are always uh, convex in nature when it comes to comparison of code X and code Y. Mhm. So, having said that, I don't want to touch much about the marginal rate of substitution because now this one also is now going to be calling us for us to first expand what we call the Lagrangian so that we can generate what we call the marginal rate of substitution of the utility. But rather, for a nutshell, a marginal rate of substitution, this is where we now compare the marginal rate of utility or the marginal utility of two goods. For instance, the rate of satisfaction for banana divided by the rate of satisfaction of orange, that ratio that you're going to get, that is what we call the marginal rate of substitution. Of course, it doesn't have the sign, and also it is going to be in form of a ratio form. Therefore, what is going to be giving us? It is going to be telling us at which rate can you convert whatever you are going to be getting, the satisfaction that you are going to be getting out of banana to the satisfaction that you want to get from the orange. The rate at which you are going to be converting one marginal utility against another one. That is what we refer to as the marginal rate of substitution. However, I want also to confirm to us that don't struggle much about the marginal rate of substitution for the reason being that not unless we first expand the problem that's whereby you maximize the total utility subject to a certain budget. You cannot rarely will you be in a position to understand what we actually call the marginal rate of substitution. However, I look for some examples. If the class rep are going to arrange for this, then you can look for these examples. And that one also goes for the budget, whereby we are now be talking of. Now remember what I told you about the cost rate. This is what I'm talking about. This budget that you're talking here. This bit that you're talking about here. That budget that you're talking about at that point, this is what is now going to be illustrated by this fraction here. Whereby it will be income against the prices of the product which you want to be buying. Therefore, in this case also, there are two goods which are going to be in the market. Therefore, that is X and Y, and therefore you're going to be comparing their prices with the level of income, and therefore you generate the budget because of course the budget income must be equal to the expenditure so that you can be in equilibrium. Therefore, that is the income, and the other side is the expenditure, which is now going to be the costing of the total utility, because of course you are going to be assuming that you cannot buy or you cannot go to consume something which is not going to be uh, buyable, or in other words, you cannot consume goods which you cannot be able to buy. Therefore, this one now becomes your costing. I give you this handout also, therefore you don't have to struggle much. Consumer equilibrium, this one I don't want also to mention much about it, for the reason being that now this one will now be comparison between the marginal rate, that ratio that we had there before. Remember, if you can recall this ratio here, it is this ratio here, and whereby you have the MUN, marginal utility for X, and the marginal utility for Y. And therefore, if you consider this equation here, and you compare it with this equation here, definitely you can make Px and Py the subject of the formula, and then Mu and Mx, Mux and Muy, you take them on the other side, and therefore you are going to generate something called the marginal rate of substitution on one side, and also the ratio of Px and Py on the other side. And therefore, that is how we are going to be achieving the equilibrium. And that's why I told you there before that the cardinal approach of utility satisfaction, or the highest level of satisfaction, it is going now to be correlated to this function here. And for you to be able to correlate this function here, you now come and solve this problem that you have here. The total the gradient problem, whereby the total utility subject to a certain constraint, in which this constraint here, it is the same as where is it? It is the same as this budget constraint that you have here. Therefore, I don't want to touch much about mathematical approach of this utility satisfaction, for the reason being that we have not done any sort of calculation in this nature. Therefore, allow me to conclude at that, and therefore say that I will be giving you this handout. That's why I said that I want to have just a 1 hour lecture with you, so that at least you can have an understanding of what is in that handout that I gave you. The others is just understanding. Therefore, I don't want to mention much of that area, the income and the substitution effect, for the reason being that that will be a little bit deeper, and also you have the handout for the same. Therefore, what will happen is that I will give you also this handout for the three institutions. Therefore, I'm going to share with you so that you can share with your members, and also the class rep to make sure that you correct this as a handout against, and therefore you share it to your member. I'm not going to share it in the common WhatsApp group because we have different institutions on the same. Having said that, I don't think there is much thing that I need to say today. I think I have already given you a clear insight which can assist you to understand the handout that I gave you. Unless maybe there is any question which is very burning, I think I don't have much to say as far as the consumer theory is concerned. Whatever is remaining will be the calculation bit of the consumer theory. What we are going to do once we resume, or if the class rep is going to be vigilant enough, he or she can arrange for a lecture for mathematical approach of consumer theory. And if you are not willing to do that because now we are heading on a Christmas, then we can wait until next semester. But I would encourage us to have one, so that by the time you come for the next semester, at least it will be easier for us. We are going just to do examples from the topic number 1 all the way to the last topic. Somebody is asking if the consumer theory will be on our card. Why not? You have a problem? You have a problem with that? Tobias? That's why I told you. That's why I told you. It will be very important. It will be very important and very significant if we can have as much interaction as possible before you resume the lectures. For the reason being that if we can have that, it will also give you an understanding of some areas that you never manage to cover in the class. So that by the time we now resume in the lectures, that is next semester, that is next year, you will be just subjecting me to the question from one topic to another to another to another. You just get the clarity in terms of the question that we expect. And maybe we can also have a scenario whereby we can have a card, for instance. In fact, we are going to have a card, then we can have time for us to revise that card. And as I told you before, my card is very long. It is very, very long. I always give almost 60 to 70 marks card, and then of course it's going to be slashed to 20, and then you have an assignment of 10. So that one will give us a clear understanding of how these topics are going to be covered. But for the mathematical approach, that one also depends with your class rep. If the class rep is going to arrange for one, then I'm ready and I'm free to assist us so that we can be able to have the mathematical approach of consumer theory. So, to answer your question, it will be there. Be sure it will be there. So you need to be prepared for consumer theory exam question. And also, I think I have to give you an assignment on that area. Okay? That okay? We have somebody else who have another concern? Because I want to release you so that you can go for other business. Now today being Saturday, I know majority of us might be engaged with their parent affairs. So I would like us to, if at all you can allow us, you can also you can terminate at that, unless maybe there is anybody who has a concern. So for the mathematical approach, that one I leave to class rep. Class rep, if you want to arrange for a mathematical approach of this topic, that one I'm going to leave it to you. But if you're not willing, then what will happen is that once we resume next semester, we are going to cover one class, but then I don't know how time will be. We might find ourselves just giving, I will find myself just giving cut and not having time to revise with you guys. So that one also goes to you. If you find it is going to be relevant, arrange for one. Mkikula nyama za holiday, then you can think of maybe also discussing it. You can also think of discussing that. Any concern? If there is no one concern, then you can leave, because I'm going to close this one once everybody leaves so that I can be sure that everybody is satisfied. So if you don't have any question, you can leave. Therefore, once I see that there is now no one who is in the class, then I can close at that point. I'm seeing some students who are available. Some other people are coming. Can you leave? All of you, can you leave? If you don't have question. Unless there is a burning issue. If there is no burning issue, then you can leave so that I can close it. Any question? Class rep. Can the class rep confirm that everything is okay? I'm waiting for the confirmation from the class rep. Yes, go. I want people to leave so that I can be satisfied that everybody is okay. Everyone is okay. You have a question, Eric? Ask. If you have a question, then ask. What I'm saying is that for mathematical approach of this consumer theory, that one I'm going to do it. If the class rep is going to arrange for one, I have not touched mathematical approach for the reason being that 1 hour is not sufficient for us. 1 hour is not sufficient. I just wanted to give you an understanding which is going to give you a clear insight to assist you to go through the topic. So that now once we start now covering the mathematical approach, it will be very, very easy for all of us. Otherwise, for the theory part of it, I don't think I'll be able to cover it even when you are going to resume. Therefore, If there is anybody who has not managed to grasp that, then they have to go to that channel and then they are going to review on that channel. So I want people to leave. I want people to leave so that they can close it. I want people to leave. I don't know why I'm seeing 16 students available. Where are people joining? Or are these students whom am I speaking to? Or there's some other guys who are there? Do you have a student here? Can you confirm to me whether there are students here? Raise your hand if there are students, please. Just raise high or just raise your. Can you don't have a student here? So that I can close it. I'm saying this. I'm saying the student. We are supposed to leave now because I don't think there is anything else that you should be adding on top of what you have done. So what will happen is, class rep kindly, I'm going to send this handout to us, this PowerPoint to us, then share it to the members. Thereafter, if the members are going to request that we have another virtual class whereby we can discuss the mathematical approach of consumer theory, I am free, I am available. Kindly arrange for that, and then you let me know in advance. I'll prepare the handout, I'll send you so that once we start now discussing it, already members will have that handout with them. Also, if they find that it will not be good for them to have that, I also don't have a problem with that. The only challenge will arise that we will not have an opportunity to discuss the cut that you are going to be having, the sitting cut. Because we are going to have a sitting cut once we resume, and I also was intending we do it the very first class and then we discuss, so that at least you can understand the sort of the question and how to answer those questions. Therefore, this one I'm just going to leave it to us to make that decision. Is that better? Would that be better? That one I'm just going to leave it to us, then you can decide. If you find that you don't want to get involved in any other online class, well, I don't have a problem with that. We are going to do the mathematical approach of this unit, this topic, and others once you resume. But if you want us to do that, then I'm also available. I'm also available because it's just a matter of preparing the handout and giving you, and then we come and discuss. That one I'm going to leave it to you, graduates, for the three institutions to make that decision. That be fair? Will that be okay? I want people to leave. If you don't have any question, I want to leave so that you can also go and engage yourself with other businesses. Remember, we were not writing the notes. I'm going to give you the handout. It was just a matter of you reasoning so that once you give the handout, you can understand what it is all about. So can you leave? I'm going to close this one once I confirm that everybody has left. Class rep, tell your members to leave. I'm still seeing 9 students available. I want them to leave. I'm still seeing 9 students available. I want them to go. I don't want to see any student. Kindly go. Go away. Go away. Go away. Go away. Go away. Go away. Can all students leave, please? Don't worry about the handout. Handout, I'm going to share it with the class. And let me just share it right now. Let me share it right now. Who are these people joining? Can you leave? I have shared the handout with you. Go away, please. Go away, please.